everyone, welcome to my channel, HFY Beyond Terra. This channel is all about HFY and sci-fi stories. Now, let's start the story.
The triple moons locked into alignment, exactly on schedule 3 pale discs stacked like coins on black velvet. A geometry so rare it wouldn't happen again for nearly half a century. Princess Elira watched them rise from the palace's crystalline corridor, her reflection drifting over the window's glassy surface so she looked doubled. One Elira inside, the Empire's glittering heart, and one Elira out among indifferent orbits, where gravity made decisions and nobody demanded she make babies for a treaty. "You're doing that thing again," a voice said behind her. "The one where you pretend celestial mechanics are more interesting than your mother." Elira didn't turn. "They are more interesting than you, mother." The soft chorus of the Queen's attendants shifted, the sound like wind chimes caught in an impatient breeze. Their bioluminescent robes painted ripples of color across the polished floor, and Elira watched those colors in the window rather than meet her mother's eyes. Queen Menace stepped into the reflection beside her, regal even while tired. The indigo blood marks at her temples looked darker than usual, as if the palace's cosmetic technicians had run out of optimism. Her long, tapered ears longer than Elira's by the tiniest, most insulting hereditary margin tilted forward in warning. "This is our 37th conversation about your betrothal prospects," Menace said. "I'm keeping count now." Oren says I'm obsessive. Elira's reflection offered a small, polite smile. "My reflection is excellent company and agrees with everything I say. Your reflection will be 47 years older when those moons align again," Menace replied, voice tightening, "still unmarried. And our empire will have collapsed because you were too particular about whose genetic material you wished to combine with yours." That finally earned the Queen a turn. Elira faced her, immediately regretting it, because Menace's exhaustion wasn't theatrical. It was the kind that sank into bone. The tips of her ears drooped a fraction 3. Generations of selective breeding, now weighted by 2 years of bordering war reports. The Karvik coalition established forward positions on 17 border worlds. In the last standard year, Menace said, dropping her diplomatic tone like a crown onto stone, "Intelligence suggests consolidation for a major push, the defense. Council estimates we have perhaps 2 years before they move against the core systems. Our military capacity is insufficient for a prolonged assault. I've read the briefings," Elira said. "I receive the same reports you do. Then, you understand why a strategic marriage is our most efficient route to reinforcement. The Cineran Empire would demand mining rights in exchange for fleets," Elira said, already hearing the treaty language in her head, friendly words hiding sharp hooks. "Which means we buy security by hollowing out our economic independence." Or in one of Menace's advisors, identifiable by the particular amber flare of his robe, made a sound suspiciously like a laugh, being strangled in its cradle. Menace shot him a look that dimmed him to near darkness. "Fine," Menace said. "The core warlord houses, then, pure military alliance, no economic strings. Their commander's youngest son has been sending overtures for 8 months. The same youngest son who executed 43 prisoners at his coming-of-age ceremony." Elira replied, and tells it as a dinner joke. I've attended 3 of those dinners. The humor did not translate. The Zentari merchant princes? They require conversion to their corporate faith, Elira said. Ritual scarification and theology where profit margins are proof of divine favor. If I must worship anything, I'd like a god with better accounting ethics. And the Solarian Compact. Merith didn't say it with enthusiasm. Nobody said Solarian Compact with enthusiasm. Humans were too unpredictable, too quick to sell sincerity as a product, too fond of turning catastrophe into motivational speeches. Their envoy speaks like he's being live-edited, Elira said. His neural implant optimizes his phrasing for maximum diplomatic impact. Conversing with him feels like being pitched a life plan by a committee. Also, he described intimacy as implementing biological integration protocols, which made my soul attempt to leave my body. Merith closed her eyes and took a long, controlled breath, the kind meditation instructors claimed created peace, but mostly just delayed inevitable arguments by 30 seconds. I have organized a grand assembly, she said. Elira blinked. A what? 200 systems. Represented. Every eligible candidate meeting basic requirements of age, political standing, and absence of active warrants. Only active warrants, Elira murmured. How generous. You will attend, Merith continued. You will observe, with flawless protocol, and you will select someone. Elira, I am not asking any more. The corridor seemed to hold its breath. Behind the queen, the advisors went still, their robes dimmed, as if even bioluminescence knew when to be quiet. Elira's ears tilted back, an involuntary, embarrassingly honest reaction she had never managed to train out of her body. Then she laughed. It wasn't the refined, bell-like sound she used at receptions. It was the real laugh that erupted when logic tripped over itself. It echoed off the high ceiling until even Merith's composure frayed at the edges. 200. Suitors, Elira repeated. Mother, do you remember what happened at the last formal presentation? The one with 6 candidates. You rejected them. I rejected performances, Elira said. Gestures calculated, words rehearsed, smiles timed. It was like watching people audition for the role of consort rather than meeting. Anyone who could live in that role without collapsing into strategy. I expect you to take this seriously. I am seriously skeptical, Elira said, that multiplying a failed approach will create a miracle. Merith turned back to the window and stared at the aligned moons, as if hoping orbital mechanics might hand her a solution. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted, less queen, more mother. What are you waiting for? She asked quietly. What quality do you keep hoping for that none of them possess? Elira watched their reflections overlap. Same blood marks, same elongated ears, same legacy. Different hearts. Someone who isn't performing, Elira said. Someone complete without me. Someone who doesn't need my attention as proof they matter. Someone who would choose me because they want to, not because they want what I represent. That isn't how alliances work. I know, Elira said. That's why I keep refusing them. Merith left without another word. Her entourage followed like a comet tail of controlled light. Orin paused at the corridor's end. his ears angled in what Elira recognized as sympathetic apology. "The assembly begins in 4 days," he said. "We've requisitioned 3 extra landing platforms. Logistics are becoming a living nightmare." "I'll attend," Elira replied. "I'll observe every presentation. Tell my mother not to expect miracles because the stage is larger." That night, in her chambers, Elira activated the holographic dossier list. Warriors with kill counts displayed like academic honors. Merchants whose assets were calculated in planetary GDP. Scholars with inventions that bent physics. Diplomats who spoke 14 languages without needing to blink. She felt nothing except fatigue. She wondered if she was being impossibly idealistic. To want a person who didn't treat her attention like a trophy. The transport shuttle rattled during atmospheric entry, a sound Jace Cade had learned to categorize as either normal stress or prepare to meet your ancestors. After 15 years bouncing between systems on budget ships, Jace trusted his ear. This rattle belonged to the first category. Though the passenger across from him a Vela diplomat whose skin flushed in anxious color, Bands clearly disagreed. "That resonance is not standard," the Vela said, flashing anxious yellow-orange. "I've logged 42 transfers and have never encountered." "You've probably never flown Consolidated Transit," Jace said, tightening his grip on the equipment case wedged between his boots. "They specialize in vessels that technically meet regulations, while still encouraging existential reflection. You intentionally choose travel that inspires existential reflection." "I choose travel I can afford," Jace said. "It just comes with philosophy." The shuttle jolted. His case tried to slide away. He trapped it with one practiced foot and pulled it back. Inside, wrapped in foam older than some governments, sat analog equipment, physical cameras with glass lenses, standalone audio recorders, and 3 notebooks made from processed plant fiber air, expensive and deeply impractical. "You're the human documenting the assembly," the Vela said, settling into curious green. "Your name was on the personnel manifest, Jace Cade," he said. "Independent cultural archivist, specialist in analog preservation." "Why analog?" the diplomat asked. "Neural capture can record sensory input with nearly perfect fidelity." Jace had answered this question roughly 400 times and had different responses for different moods. For genuine curiosity, he gave the honest one. "Neural capture records what you noticed," he said. "It preserves experience, filtered through attention and bias. I want what was actually there: ambient sound, peripheral interactions, the way light shifts across a room, the small moments that brains discard because they aren't the main story. History is usually made in the margins." The shuttle dipped lower, and through the viewport Jace saw the Etherin palace less built than grown. Crystalline spires rose like frozen lightning. Temporary landing platforms circled it in rings, crowded with ships that glittered with different physics. "There must be 100 vessels," the Vela whispered, impressed Violet. 200 suitors, Jace said, plus entourage. Observers, staff. I heard they had to import emergency catering supplies from 3 nearby colonies just to keep everyone fed. "Are you nervous?" the diplomat asked. "This is a significant event." Jace considered it. I'm nervous about sight lines, he said truthfully. If the hall's been modified to fit the crowd, my setup needs to adapt. I can handle ceremony. Bad angles are harder. The shuttle landed with a thud that validated every prior complaint. Jace grabbed his case before gravity could negotiate ownership of his belongings. The landing platform was chaos with paperwork. A core warlord in weapon-integrated armor argued with security about powering down ceremonial guns. Zentari merchants wore gravity jewelry that made walking near them feel like climbing invisible hill. LS, a human woman with a glowing temple implant, held 3 conversations at once, switching languages like she was flipping cards. Jay spotted an Etherin staffer trying to direct traffic, with the expression of someone who had stopped believing cooperation was possible and now simply prayed for minimal fires. "Excuse me," he said, approaching Jace Cade. "Archivist, I was told to report to someone named Suri." The staffer's ears swiveled toward him like a censored dish catching signal. Relief softened her face. "Thank the orbits," she said. "Someone who read instructions. I'm Suri, 3rd Assistant to Ceremonial Coordination, which means I handle problems that don't belong anywhere else. You're 3 days early," she added. The brief suggested arriving early to assess the venue. "That is the opposite of a problem," Suri said fervently. "You're the first contractor who arrived early instead of late. I could kiss you, but it violates 7 workplace protocols, and I'm already drowning in regulations." A nearby argument rose in volume, something about presentation precedence. Saris's ears flattened. "Follow me," she said. "I'll take you to the main hall. The sooner you're set up and no longer my responsibility, the sooner I can convince a core warlord that ceremonial means unloaded." They moved through service corridors into increasingly luminous public spaces. The palace blended technology and aesthetics with infuriating elegance walls that glowed without fixtures, floors that adjusted traction to footsteps, air that moved like it had a plan. "So you're the analog archivist," Suri said as they walked. "We had to consult historical databases to understand half your equipment list." "Professionally anachronistic," Jace said. "Is it practical?" she asked. "Or is it a human aesthetic hobby like collecting ancient music on vinyl?" "Practical," he said. "Analog recordings can't be quietly edited without leaving evidence. Digital files can be altered by someone with more processing power than ethics. For events involving powerful people, I prefer records that are hard to rewrite." "That's cynical. That's experience," Jace replied. Suri opened a panel into the ceremonial hall, and the space swallowed sound. The vaulted ceiling caught light and redistributed it like water. At the far end sat a throne that looked like crystallized starlight. "The assembly is in for days," Suri said. "Suitors along both sides, Queen Merith and advisors on secondary platforms. Princess Elira on the throne. Where do you want to set up?" she asked. Jace walked the perimeter, testing angles with his eyes, mapping audio in his head. Most archivists would place themselves near the throne to capture the princess's reactions. But Jace had learned the best material lived in the spaces between focus points transitions, waiting the moments people forgot they were observed. "Over there," he said, pointing to a recessed shadow along the eastern wall. I can see the throne, the suitors, and the audience, far enough that people stop noticing me, close enough to capture clean sound. You want to be inconspicuous. I want to be invisible, Jace said. The best documentation happens when people forget you exist. Cerise studied him for a moment, then nodded. That actually makes sense. Everyone else demanded. Proximity to the princess. You're the first person who asked to stand farther away. I'm not here to see the princess, Jace said. I'm here to record what happens when 200 people try to be seen by her at once. Cerise helped him set up equipment. She asked smart questions. He answered with the enthusiasm of someone who rarely got to discuss his craft. Without being teased for carrying notebooks like contraband, when they finished, Cerise exhaled. This is the least complicated interaction I've had all week. You arrived early, you knew what you needed, and you didn't create additional crises. It helps that nobody expects anything from me, Jace said. I'm furniture that happens to record history. Your furniture status is noted and deeply appreciated, Cerise said dryly. I'll register your equipment location, so cleaning staff don't relocate it. When she left, the hall dimmed into ambient glow. Jace did final tests, then paused, looking out over the empty space that would soon hold a storm of ambition. He wondered if any suitor would say something honest. Probably not. He thought, but sometimes the truest parts of people showed in the strain between performance and reality. On assembly day, the first suitor arrived with a fleet. Not symbolic escorts, actual warships in tight formation, triggering palace defense alarms for 40 seconds before diplomatic credentials cleared. Jace watched from his shadowed position as Cerise received the news through her neural link and cycled through 7 expressions of "you have got to be kidding me" without speaking. That's Commander Vorken's air, she muttered. He interpreted. Make an impression as arrive like an invasion. Did it work? Jace asked, adjusting his camera. Cerise snorted. The princess hasn't looked up from her data slate since he walked in. The hall filled until it felt like a marketplace wearing a diplomat's clothing. Suitors lined both sides, each maintaining their assigned place while also trying to radiate dominance over the neighbors. Zentari gravity trinkets distorted the air. Vela diplomats stood in geometries so perfect they looked like proofs. Humans clustered together with the defensive solidarity of people. Who knew they were biologically unremarkable in a room built for spectacle? Princess Elira sat on the throne, poised and bored in equal measure, her expression the polite mask of someone who had learned to endure attention like weather. Queen Merith rose on her platform, amplified her voice, and opened the proceedings. Each candidate, 7 minutes. Jace did quick math. 3 days, almost a full day of presentations. Total, he documented longer events, but rarely with so much concentrated desperation. Commander Vorken's air began with battle footage carefully edited, dramatic, full of heroic lighting. My tactical record is unblemished, the air proclaimed. Elira lifted her eyes. One question, the air paused, clearly startled by an interruption. What was your casualty rate among subordinate personnel? Elira asked, voice calm. The air's confidence shifted just a fraction. Acceptable losses, define acceptable numerically. He swallowed approximately 37%. Thank you, Elira said. Continue. The air continued, but the performance had cracked. Jace captured it, the tiny defensiveness, the recalculation. Elira listened without cruelty, then thanked him with perfect courtesy. The pattern repeated. A merchant prince made it rain suspended gemstones. Elira asked about labor conditions. A polished human envoy spoke like a perfectly tuned instrument. Elira asked whether he wrote his own words or borrowed them from his implant's advisory stream. A scholar displayed an invention. Elira asked about cost, consequence, and who paid the price. By the 12th suitor, Jace understood what he was watching. Not a bride choosing a groom, but an analyst dissecting offerings. Elira wasn't being impressed. She was being tested, and she refused to play the game as written. Between presentations, as the room reset its focus, Jace noticed her gaze drift, not wandering aimlessly, but pausing with intent. On him. Not flirtation, not a coy glance, curiosity. She watched him adjust angles, jot notes in paper notebooks, check audio levels the way other people checked their own reflections. She looked at his work the way she looked at the suitors, except without the royal mask. Jace's stomach tightened. Being noticed was professional failure, so he moved more slowly, more subtly. He reminded himself he was here to observe, not be observed. Data brought escalating spectacle. A caged bioluminescent creature offered as good fortune. A combat dance that made security personnel grip their restraint devices. A singer whose vocal range threatened to destroy Jace's audio recorder. Elira endured it. Question. Cut through. Thank you. Next. By day 3, even the suitors looked tired of themselves. The final candidate, a young Cineran royal, arrived with no fireworks, no weapons, no theatrics. He presented a defense policy proposal that actually addressed Etherin sovereignty with credible details. For the first time, Elira sounded almost genuinely interested. This is impressive, she said. Hope lit the Cineran's face. Then she pointed to 7 cooperative defense stations hidden in the fine print. Permanent installations. Control of entry points disguised as partnership. Hope died. Queen Merith rose. The hall's anticipation became heavy, almost physical. Princess Elira, the Queen announced, you have observed all candidates. The assembly awaits your selection. Silence stretched. Jace expected a diplomatic delay, a request for time, a careful retreat. Instead, Elira stood. She descended the throne steps with effortless grace, then walked, past the first row of suitors, past the warlord heir, past the diamond maker, past the optimized envoy, past the scholar, the dancer, the singer, past the last formal candidate. She walked into the observer space. Jace adjusted a camera, then realized the murmuring had grown louder, because the princess had stopped roughly 2 meters from him. He looked up. Elira's ears tilted forward in focused attention. Her expression was the look of someone who had finally solved a long, frustrating equation. She lifted her hand and pointed directly at him. The gesture was casual and ceremonial at the same time. This one, she said clearly. I choose this one. Jace's brain cycled through confusion, alarm, and the desperate hope that someone behind him was suddenly more interesting. "I'm sorry," he blurted. "There's been a mistake. I'm not a suitor. I'm the archivist. I'm aware." Elira said, "I'm choosing you anyway." Behind her, Queen Merith made a sound that contained 17 different varieties of royal exasperation. The suitors erupted objections ranging from polite outrage to barely restrained fury. Elira turned, and her voice shifted into something unmistakably sovereign. "Perhaps," she said, "you should let me explain before you debate whether my choice is valid." The hall quieted slowly, reluctantly, like a storm being forced to hold still. "I spent 3 days watching 200 impressive people. Explain why I should choose them," Elira said. Every gesture calculated, every sentence engineered, every offer designed to prove worthiness. She swept her gaze across the suitors. "I learned that performance reveals what you want me to see, not who you are. One of you boasted of victories without naming the dead. One of you displayed wealth without speaking of the workers who bled for it. One of you delivered perfect words that weren't truly yours." She gestured without looking toward Jace. "This human came here to do his job," she said. "He positioned himself to capture truth, not praise. He wrote notes in paper because he believes details matter. He recorded transitions moments you assumed nobody would preserve. Because he respects reality more than narrative. A Zentari." Prince protested. "Those are professional skills, not qualifications for consort." "You're correct," Elira said. "That isn't why I'm interested." She faced the suitors again. "I'm interested because he did all of this without trying to win me. While you performed for my attention, he actively tried to avoid it. And in a room full of people begging to be seen, the person who wasn't begging was unmistakable." Queen Merith descended from her platform with measured control. "That looked like restraint made visible, Elira," she said carefully. "You cannot select a spouse based on professional invisibility." "Why not?" Elira countered. "You asked me to choose someone professionally impressive. That has failed repeatedly." Jace found his voice, though it came out to high. "I feel like I should have input, considering you've just announced my entire future in public." Elira blinked, then her expression softened. And for the first time Jace saw something beneath the polished mask. Not a symbol, but a person. "You're right," she said. "I was presumptuous. I pointed at you like a decision instead of asking if you wanted to be involved in that decision." "Yes," Jace said, breathless, extremely presumptuous. The hole's attention pressed against his skin like heat. "I came to document," he continued. "I've spent 15 years being invisible on purpose. You've just turned me into the subject." "I know," Elira said, "and I'm sorry. But I chose you because when I looked for a moment of honesty in this hall, I found it in the only person not trying to sell me anything." "That doesn't mean we know each other," Jace said. "Watching someone work isn't the same as knowing how they live." "No," Elira agreed. "So I'm not asking you to marry me today." The suitors collectively inhaled, as if relieved to hear sanity return. "I'm asking," Elira said, "if you want to understand why I chose you, not the political reasons, but the personal ones." The reasons that made me walk past 200 candidates and point at the one person, trying not to be pointed at. Jace glanced at his cameras, still recording. He thought about the story he was supposed to capture, and the story he had just fallen into. If I say yes, he said slowly, my life as an observer ends. I become visible forever. Elira's ears tilted forward, and if you say no, I'm forced to choose someone who wants me as a strategic object. I'll be trapped in the same pattern. Jace looked at her, really looked, and saw a woman exhausted by being treated like a prize. I want to understand, he said finally. I want an honest conversation. I need you to understand that I'm terrified of what happens when invisible people become visible. Elira smiled an unguarded, genuine expression that made her look younger and less burdened. I'm terrified. She admitted quietly that nobody will ever choose me as a person rather than an opportunity. She extended her hand, not pointing now, offering. So, she said, voice steady, perhaps we can be terrified together and see if that's more interesting than being carefully safe alone. Jace did something he had never done mid-assignment. He powered down his cameras. He closed his notebooks. He stepped out of the shadow he'd built for himself over 15 years and took her hand. All right, he said. Let's have an honest, complicated conversation and see where it goes. Around them, the Grand Assembly collapsed into diplomatic chaos. Protests filed. Alliances recalculated. Queen Merith already composing explanations for decisions that defied political logic. But Jace barely heard it. Elira's attention reel, focused, unoptimized, settled on him like sunlight after a long winter. She asked him questions about his work, his stubborn insistence on analog truth, his reasons for choosing invisibility. And she listened the way she listened to no one else, not to evaluate his usefulness, but to learn his shape. Suri appeared through the crowd holding a tablet stacked with urgent messages, and a look of barely contained amusement. For what it's worth, she told Jace, you were right. The interesting story was what the Suitors did while hoping the princess would notice them. She glanced at Elira, then back at him. Just didn't expect the ending to be the one person who wasn't hoping to be noticed getting noticed. Anyway, Jace exhaled, half laugh, half surrender. I'm going to have to file the strangest report of my career. Elira's smile sharpened with wry sincerity. And I'm going to have to explain why I rejected 100 qualified candidates to choose someone who wasn't competing. Suri lifted her tablet. Congratulations. You've both created months of diplomatic paperwork. Elira squeezed Jace's hand, small pressure, warm, real. Maybe, Jace said, washing her face. It's worth it if the conversations are honest. Elira's ears tilted forward, pleased. Honest conversations, she echoed. Terrifying, complicated, and finally real. Outside the palace, the three moons had already begun their slow drift apart, the perfect alignment dissolving into ordinary orbits inside, in the aftermath of spectacle and strategy. Something rarer than celestial coincidence had begun, two people choosing uncertainty on purpose. And for the first time in 15 years, Jace Cade found himself more interested in living the story than recording it.